Since a young age, I've been fascinated by the ghost-like nature of these creatures. And while we all know the ghost-like idea is more fitting for a campfire story than reality, I still hear stories of mature bucks that live in relatively small home ranges, yet remain completely unseen. Mapping Whitetails will be spaced out between other content on the channel, and throughout it, we'll be diving into a variety of different terrain types and topics. In this first video, we're going to be looking at something that I believe has been vastly overlooked at in the whitetail world. It's something that I'm calling invisible funnels, and technically they're just regular funnels, but in order to find them, you have to take topo knowledge with boots on the ground effort. I hope you all are able to find it valuable, and let's get into the video. I'm definitely not stretched for content when it comes to this topic. Deer at the end of the day do two easily observed things. They bed and they move, and understanding the why behind each action is the task at hand. Sometimes their decisions make total sense, other times they defy all logic. So I invite you to think alongside me, question what we're seeing, and build your own ideas in the comments below. We will all have to be creative in our thinking while not overcomplicating the situation. After all, as I've said before, these are just deer. They need food, water, and shelter. With that in mind, let's meet our subject for part number 1. Today we're going to be looking at deer number 41, also known as, what the heck, is that a 6x5? The first time I ever laid eyes on this buck, I definitely wasn't looking for him. It was December 5th, I had a friend with me and we were out documenting more of winter's movements. He's a big 5x5, has a hard limp, and he lives in this same core area. So naturally when I spotted this buck with my drone, I assumed it was winter again. But as you'll see, Andy has better eyes than I do.
Ha. I don't know who you are. I don't know who you
that
are.
left side, holy
Oh, that's him.
smokes.
You see that limp?
Turn around.
Oh, he's limping. There he is.
Well, I would tell you if, you'd stop.
He's about to walk into the opening here. I mean, antler-wise, he's there. Whoa.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, that left
Whoa.
side.
It took me a second to register that this wasn't winter, but once I saw the frame on this thing, a clean 6x5, I knew I immediately had a new character on the board. From that day on, he became a staple in this area, and he had the smallest home range of any buck I've ever recorded, just about 80 acres. As a hunter, I've noticed there's mystery bucks that seem to pop out of thin air throughout the season. For me, that usually takes place around December. I would assume it's from late season food pulling them in, maybe there's more hunting pressure on properties around me. It could just be postseason rut and a buck is searching for the last receptive doe, or other times, it's just part of that buck's individual seasonal behavior. GPS color studies have proven some bucks can utilize two distinct home ranges dependent upon the time of year, earning them the label mobile bucks. I believe that's what the 6x5 was, but ironically, once he showed up, he was the furthest thing from mobile. Let's zoom in on his core area, and the first thing that's going to stand out is this small thermal hub. A thermal hub is a low-lying area where multiple ridges and drainages all come together. These features create consistent thermal and wind behavior that bucks use to their advantage. In the morning, cool air from surrounding ridges slide down into the bottom, pulling scent from every direction with it. In the evening, as the sun sets and the air cools again, thermals begin falling back down into that same low spot. That means that thermal hubs can collect scent from all around both morning and evening. By bedding just above the hub, a mature buck like the 6x5 can scent check most of what's around him and have multiple escape routes if anything feels off. The 6x5's mini thermal hub in particular has 3 drainages, 4 ridges, and a small mouth opening to the south, which leads to water and potentially additional food. This kind of terrain isn't just good, it's strategic. And I'll continue to promise that in a future video we'll go much deeper into how thermal hubs work throughout the day, how to find them on a map, and how to hunt them without blowing the whole setup altogether. Add all of that information to the overabundance of acorns last season, and it's no surprise this deer decided to settle down here. This spot was about as whitetail perfect as it gets. Cover, food, water, terrain diversity, and thermals all working in his favor. To the east, he could hop this little saddle and make it to a clear cut for security. To the southeast, he could hop the river and tuck into even thicker cover. And to make things even more interesting, he wasn't alone. I documented around 7 mature bucks using this same area all throughout the season, and that includes our old friend Winter. When a location draws in that many mature bucks, it's not just a random coincidence. It's functionally sound and strategically secure. So let's zoom out again and take a look at the 6x5's bedding areas. I've recorded him bedding in these four general locations, and rarely did he ever leave his home range. He bedded on top of this point strictly on a south wind, and as for these three other bedding areas, there's no clear reason why he would choose one over the other. It might correlate to where he was moving back into the area from, or where he intended to go that evening, but as you'll see shortly, he tends to leave the area somewhat randomly from each bedding location. The first bedding area we'll look at is out on this point. We've already looked at this bedding area in my first video, and he only used it on a south wind. From here, deer could catch thermals rising from the field below throughout the day and scent check the area while staying elevated. When the thermals switched, he would move down to the mouth of the hub and sometimes enter into this field. This second area is the thermal hub. He sort of bedded all over the hub, but was mostly located in the lower elevation, tucked in pretty tight up against the bottom. This was his most frequently used bedding area, likely because of its ease of access to all the resources around him. The third bedding area was found at the peak of this draw. This area sits right at the transition between a clear cut and mature timber, and it connects directly to two saddles, one to the west and one to the north. Terrain convergence plus security edge equals another very solid bedding option. In the late season, I was finding a lot of bachelor groups utilizing this bedding area, and it makes a lot of sense. And the fourth area is kind of tucked deep off of this south finger. I only found him here whenever there was really bad weather, and I'm not 100% sure this was intentional, but for now, I think that it was. It's a very rugged, steep little hideout, and his most fascinating journey starts at this bedding area later in the video. So let's talk about how this buck moved and why some of his treks are so useful to hill country hunters. Once again, I'm skipping the movement out of this bed because it was previously covered in pretty good detail, and if you want a breakdown of that, check out my first video. I'm going to focus on the few times that he left his home range for now. Most of these lines within his home range, he's browsing around on native browse and primarily on acorns. So let's start with two of his travel routes from the thermal hub. This route took place early in the morning on a northwest wind. He moves east across this saddle, checks his second bedding area, then shifts north over another saddle. He then wraps around the high side of a draw, slips by a field edge, hits a community scrape, and circles back again through a third saddle to his bedding area so he can browse around before bedding back down. To me, this first travel route is really cool. He utilized three saddles in a single morning movement. Saddles are simply low spots or passes between higher areas, and they're used as travel routes to conserve more energy and move more efficiently, and in some cases allows them to scent check what's above them, and they're generally met with a drainage on either side of them. If you ever find a topographic feature like this, three saddles converging into one area, and you're not finding a way to hunt it, I'd better keep going. This next route is a little different. He moves across this little ridge that's a terrible funnel, checks a pond, and walks the field edge on this peninsula, then browses his way south before circling back north into a drainage and beds back at the peak of the drainage. This little ridge is quite the pinch point. It looks like a great place to set up, but I rarely recorded any deer traveling across it. And if you think about it, it's actually quite a dangerous trek. Crossing in this area is as if you were walking across a bridge. If somehow you encounter danger on both sides of you, your only option is to full send it off of the bridge. In this case, that would be a bluff on either side. So it's sort of a high risk, high reward situation for deer. If deer cross here, they end up saving steps and it allows them to travel more directly, but they do it at a cost of removing their biggest advantage: security. No surprise that most deer almost always skirt to the north instead, where the cover is thicker and the escape routes are better. Most of his movements I recorded out of this bedding area were kept within his home range, except for this path to the south again, which he took on a west wind this time, but we just covered that travel route, so let's move on to the next one. Next, we're going to look at his third bedding area, because this is where the concept of invisible funnels finally kicks in, and it's easily my favorite topic in all of deer movement analysis. So what exactly is an invisible funnel? It's a forced travel route that sometimes isn't obvious on a map. You only really find them when you combine topo knowledge with boots on the ground effort. These trails don't stand out until you piece the two together and realize deer have no other choice but to move through these areas. So let's walk you through this prime example. He leaves his bed and instantly moves northwest through our first invisible funnel. It's simple, almost too simple to qualify as invisible, but it still technically counts. There's this massive bluff to the north, and wrapping this peninsula to the east and to the south is a long stretch of very steep terrain full of little cliffs all throughout it. There is one potential dip on topo right here, and by walking in that area, I know that it's actually impassable on foot. If you wanted to walk from here to here without walking all the way around this bluff to the north, you would have to walk through this section right here. There's no other options. Thankfully for the deer, this area is actually very difficult to hunt. And from there, he walks further east and decides he wants to move north, except, wait, zoom back out. You're here and you want to head north. Well, this bluff still says no. This is a cliff. This is a bowl that can't be traveled up thanks to a little 8-foot drop off cliff that wraps the entire inside of it. This is a cliff littered with caves. This is a cliff littered with caves. This bowl is hardly traversable and is insanely steep with boulders. Now let's zoom back out and look at that. You literally have 2 options. Choose wisely. He takes the option to the left and drops into this dry riverbed, hikes up the ridge, and then makes a turn down this middle finger ridge and heads north through Winter's favorite travel route. Every move that the 6x5 is making is dictated by terrain. Let's go back to the top of the ridge and imagine you're here and you want to head north. Your options are pretty simple. First is going back down the ridge that the 6x5 just came up, and it actually leads to a collection of impassable terrain that we just looked at, unless you want to go south and wrap back up into this thermal hub. Second is this little finger in the middle. Remember, this section has a cliff that wraps the inside of the bowl. And this section over here is also rough as a cob and drops off faster than my wife's interest when I start talking about micro-topographical influence on wind direction variability at different thermal layers. So we'll go ahead and mark that one off as well. On the other side of this bottom, there's another steep impassable bowl, a long cliff edge, a steep drainage that's littered with deadfall, or you could try and climb to the right or the left of this ditch. Most bucks choose to the right of the ditch, and technically the left side is pretty traversable, but it is littered with a bunch of little tiny boulders all over it. Or we have the third option, which instead of heading north initially, you can wrap to the left through this clear cut, drop into a draw, and move on to this other ridge. From here, you can either pop over the ridge and head straight north, or walk to the bottom and move back up this little ridge. If you do either of these 2 options, they're both invisible funnels as well. Heading straight north off of this ridge is limited by this cliff, and this bluff on the other side, forcing you to move into the bottom before having a world of options open back up to you. Moving initially to the right and then back up this ridge is pretty obvious. You have the Widower Bluff and this cliff on the other side that didn't go anywhere, and actually there's a little 5-foot cliff that extends all the way down this ridge right to about here. That restricts this area into a very, very tight funnel. No wonder the bucks are choosing the second option most of the time. After that, he moves through this clear cut, wraps the top of this draw, checks the field edge, and beds back down. Let me highlight one last critical detail that I skimmed over. The top of this draw, or drainage, or ditch, or whatever you prefer to call them. If you're hunting hill country, open OnX and mark every steep draw, then drop a pin at the top of each one of them. I'm not kidding, if all you did as a hunter was master how to gain entry and exit to those areas and hunt them under strictly ideal conditions, you'd already be one leg up. But the real magic happens when you start connecting those locations with saddles, funnels, invisible funnels, habitat transitions, time of season, and food and water sources. Over time, you can start to develop a real blueprint of how deer have to navigate the landscape. When you combine that intel with actual boots on the ground, fresh buck sign, you're no longer just hunting sign. You're hunting the entire system.